Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Paymar, and you are listening to The Big Shifts, the podcast that looks at the massive changes our world, our country, our politics, our media, and our institutions are confronting. Today, we're discussing a subject of extreme importance to our society: disinformation and misinformation, and how it impacts our decision making, our politics, and how our society can move forward in a positive direction when we no longer trust and no longer know that what we read or view or listen to in the media is true or not. To discuss this issue and some other important problems we're experiencing during this societal big shift is Dr. Corrine Graham. Corrine is the president of Graham International Consulting, a New York-based firm that helps organizations and government entities build and expand to new and existing markets. Corrine is also an honorary research fellow for the Institute for Sustainable Development at the Mona campus in Jamaica. Corrine, welcome to The Big Shift.
Hey, Jim. Thanks for the invite. Excited to be a part of this. And it is indeed a big shift. It is kind of an exciting space to be in, but also a very scary part to be a part of as well. So thank you for inviting me to be a part of this conversation or discussion.
On that topic, how do we combat misinformation and disinformation? I mean, many call for government regulation of social media platforms, online sites, and some sort of regulation of cable airwaves where lies and conspiracy theories abound. Then you get the counterpoint that if we do that, we're interfering with the First Amendment and freedom of speech. Any thoughts on how we control this kind of monster that's been unleashed online and on our airwaves?
So, you're right. Regulations are important. As businesses, you don't want as much regulation. As people, we don't want as much regulation. But I think there has to be a significant amount of that to be able to help. And we see that with our young people as well. Like even the information that's out there to either the dark web and the data mining and the things that are put there that is not appropriate for them, right? Whether they're, 18 or they're in college years and so on. And I think the other big part of this for me, and that I see that works, and I'm going to go from experience in terms of my training background or teaching background as well and research, is that those conversations need to be had and need to be real. When you put people in an environment, talk to them and you ask them a question, they're going to answer just the same way of the things that make sense. Why do you believe it's a hoax? Or you say something and they'll answer. And it's, I think you have to set the stage and kind of become human beings again somewhat, right?
Right.
I
Well,
think.
we don't talk to each other anymore. I mean,
No.
I've been in rooms with people who are sitting there communicating on their iPhones or their Samsung phones or their Google phones, and they're sitting in the same room together. I mean,
Is
it's absolutely
isn't
ridiculous.
madness. And then we talk about this, what happened in terms of health and mental health and so on, right? Here it is, you're doing this, the social behavior, the socialization process and aspect of everything are so just very separate and segmented that these add to some of the challenges that we're seeing or experiencing.
And that there's so many people on the right and on the left who kind of lock themselves in I don't know, I guess I call it an echo chamber to get their information. Like there are a slew of right-wing radio stations that people listen to at home and in their cars, and then they watch cable news channels like Fox or Newsmax, and then they're given the same information over and over again, and they don't see the other side at all. And on the left, you also have news channels giving a point of view, though not much talk radio, but a lot of online publications giving the left the same sort of echo chamber. We all listen to our own echo chambers. We listen to what we want to listen to, and then we believe what we've heard or read or seen on television. Any thoughts on how we stop this one track thinking?
So, it is a lot of work. And I think it starts by, I think people are pouring in, and there's only so much that you can give, right? So, all this information, we live in a very digital, very data information age. And I think part of that becomes with understanding what their needs are and how it is that you're going to be able to fulfill it. And I think corporate companies, the larger companies, in terms of corporate social responsibility, I think they have an opportunity and the resources to start with their employees, because many of these people are employees to these organizations, right? And,
Right,
you
right.
have rights. So it's not necessarily to have this very rigid structured government trying to help and trying to help to kind of keep a balance. And then everyone wants to have what they want when they want it, that entitlement aspect, and knowing that doesn't work. You have traffic lights for a reason, right?
Hmm.
If it
Hmm.
wasn't there, think about the chaos, the kind of stuff that would happen. So government do have a role, but I think the big businesses and even small businesses, they also have a role to be really paying attention to what's going on, because that's where all of this
Well,
happening. These shifts happen. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, 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 no. I like that train of thought. I mean, if employees were given a greater ability to communicate with management about what they see are strengths, weaknesses in the company, or the communication in the company. If management were willing to listen to that and maybe step back from everything being about total profit and how we can profit off of misinformation or disinformation, employees could make a difference.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that's spiraling in my head, and I know for sake of time, I don't want to, just go on, forever and a day. But one of the things I learned when I was younger is that we eat with our eyes, right? So go right back to marketing. For those of us who have that sensory, that's what we see. So our eyes, like that is a data point that they're trying to mine as well, right? So they're working on devices to be able to get in so that they can keep us glued to these things, whatever it is, and they're more sensational. And so at some point, this is where I believe that, you have an opportunity to get in, because it's almost like you can only pour but so much water. It's going to start to overflow. It's not going to make the difference, do you think? So you need to kind of like get it to where it is where you can get in and have that conversation, or about policies, or about regulations or things that are going to help in terms of what they're looking for.
Well, when we talk about like social governance in a company, for example, a company like Apple has pulled back on advertising on Twitter.
Hmm.
And then Elon Musk, who now owns Twitter, is coming out and saying, I'm going to build my own iPhone. And who knows if he's capable of doing that or not? But
Right.
I mean, this feuding that's going on in our society. I mean, it seems like everyone's in a fight these days, and the strength of a country like the United States is being united, not divided.
Yeah.
And it seems like our media is dividing us, and our social networking and our social network platforms are dividing us rather than bringing us together. And we need to be together because we're in a world where there are a lot of geopolitical conflicts, and we weaken ourselves, I think, by being divided. What are your thoughts on that?
So I think absolutely yes. There again, there are policies and regs, but when we are a society that's very I guess pluralistic, right, and entitled, we don't tend to think about the rest of the world, or what the impact is. And I think that's where, again, part of that is crisis management. When you talked about, earlier, talking about that pandemic, and that outbreak, is how you manage a crisis, right? When it's an issue, and then addressing it before it gets to this. Another bit is that sometimes technology is way ahead before you have regulation or legislations that are passed to to kind of help to get it, to where you need to be. But I think you really put that responsibility on organization to do better, and to ensure that they are, putting forth things that are really the right things, not misinformation or trying to spread disinformation. And I think you will start to hone that back in. I have friends that I didn't realize were so extreme in their thoughts, and they're nice people, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Good deeds and so on. But once you have that conversation, it doesn't become about the blaming. I think there's too much blaming. It's you, it's this. In one of
Right.
my erased racism class, one of the things they showed, he never thought about it. If you're five, whatever, let's say someone's 6 foot, and let's say I'm 5'2", and I can't see over the fence. Does a person who is 6 really need to be more elevated, or need those resources to be able to see over the fence? Right? Someone else might need a little bit of a boost, and so therefore we make decisions based on this for the greater good and not just for one. So.
Plus, when you talk about regulation, that plays right into the hands of a lot of people who say, "Hey, the government is too big. They're intruding on my life. They're trying to control everything." So maybe that really isn't the answer, but somehow we have to figure out how to get along with each other. We can't go on having. I think we've had over 600 mass shootings in America this
Oh
year.
my God, that's just crazy.
So we have to figure out a way to. I mean, America by and large has more weaponry per capita than any country in the world. We lose more people on our own streets than we did fighting a 20-year war in Afghanistan.
Mhm.
uh, Somehow this has to end, and I don't know how it's going to end, but it's going to take a lot of political will on both the Democratic and the Republican sides. But I want to kind of switch gears for
Mhm.
a minute and get back to the pandemic for a
Mhm.
moment, because it really has changed the way our society operates. I mean, work changed.
Mhm.
Millions of people went to offices, were staying at home and working virtually, and many people continue to work at home today.
Mhm.
Schools and universities, you work at Long Island University, closed their
Mhm.
doors to students, and young people were being educated on a computer screen. Our social lives came to a rather abrupt halt, as we were no longer able to gather or shop or go to concerts or dine in a restaurant unless we sat outside. And many stopped using mass transit and started driving. I mean, you teach at Long Island University. What's your view of how COVID and disinformation has impacted life for the students themselves?
So I mean, it has been really traumatic, and we see a lot, even in terms of when we see overall in terms of mental health stats that they've talked about and things that happen. However, one of the things I think I should point out, Jim, is that this is not a new thing, right? For like 20 something years, or more than 20 something years ago, I actually had, like being in college, right?
Mm-hmm.
The virtual world was a thing, right? I'm sure you're familiar with that. So um, with with the colleges and so on, when you get into with the students, it it provides an opportunity for diversity of skills, for people to who can work in terms of those kind of environment, do both. There was always that hiccup of, can it work, won't it, will it be effective? And I think that just happened. And I think, like, even with the in terms of the demographic that was impacted, the low income and minority communities, with in terms of technology. Like, why is it that internet wasn't free? Why is it that some school had access to computers or a laptop? This is more the K through 12 schools and so
Mm-hmm.
on. You had some of those students also in colleges who were impacted financially as a result of this. So I think we this big shift, as you shared, COVID, as unfortunate as a pandemic is, and how deadly and devastating it has been and still is, was something to really push us to where it is that we need to go in terms of what's the next reality for us, right?
Well, what is the new normal going to be? We know that many young kids, especially, fell way behind in school by not being in a classroom, without socializing with friends. I mean, kids just weren't allowed to be kids. I mean, what do you think will be the impact of this era? Will we begin to normalize again? Will kids be able to catch up from the year or two that they lost during the pandemic?
So they will definitely catch up. You have people who are wonderful, who are working to ensure that they're successful and that our young people are successful. I think there's a lot more of that. And I think a lot more of those good news and good things that are happening should happen. The new normal, I mean, it's old. It's not a new normal. And I think that's kind of what I was hoping to get to. The world as we know it has changed many ago. You see what's happening with in terms of technology, and whether it's in the renewable sustainable space, or just tech itself with stuff we mentioned Elon Musk earlier,
Mm,
and that sort of thing. So I'd seen a survey, I think it was McKinsey, I'm sorry, hopefully not misquoting, and they talked about the kind of world that they gave four world. One was, I think, blue, one was red, one was yellow, one was green, one was corporate, these mega companies, monopolies. The other one just had to do with more like the innovative space which we're in, right? A very tech driven, very innovative space that we're experiencing, and our young people are prepared for it.
mhm,
Right, we need the wisdom of the Gen X or Yers and the Boomers to kind of help to guide them through some of the nuances of how to organize and to run a company successfully, and let them run with the innovation and streamlining those tidbits. And one where they talk about, like, that balanced world, right, where artisans and so on are successful and they thrive, better housing sort of things. And the other one is just a green world, which we know about, and and green world or spaces do exist in a lot of other countries.
mm. You know, uh, as the pandemic unfolded, Corrine, we saw a lot of other serious issues surface. Like homelessness climbed to
Yeah.
all-time highs. Mental illness impacted millions of people. The World Health Organization stated that COVID-19 triggered a 25% increase in the prevalence of anxiety and depression. Young people were found to be at a disproportionate higher risk of suicide and self-harming behaviors. And as we mentioned earlier, mass shootings reached epidemic proportions. I mean, here in America, uh, there's not really a very solid safety net for these people who find themselves with mental and emotional problems. I mean, what can or should be done to help to solve this problem?
I think in the schools they do make sure, their resources, and they try to stress that and to ensure that that's available to them. But I think what is important is for us as faculty as well to be able to create a space or an environment where they know that wherever the help that they need is there, and to kind of help them thrive, right? Help them to
Mm-hmm.
become their best self. And I think we lead by example, and it goes back to even some of those toxic things that are happening, right? So those example may not be such great example that we are training. I find that young people are resilient, they're persistent, and we know they are smart, right?
Yes.
So I think we now need to just tap into to them and kind of help them to kind of like see the pathway and help to create the pathway. I want to use an example of, for example, for housing, right? This homelessness and so on. It's
Right.
nonsense. It should not happen. Personally, all of these things are my personal views. You have to put those disclaimer out there because
Mhm.
then, people are going to come after you with razor sharp teeth about something in the organizations that you're related to accordingly, which is unfortunate. But a lot of people, when I guess you call, when they get older, they're empty nesters, right? And they
Mhm.
tend to want to move to smaller spaces or different spaces, or now they're loving the main street, downtown sort of things. And yet still, they're so toxic and about making these homes that or apartments or so on that would be good for the young people, and instead of kind of like recycling, reusing, thinking about a sustainable way of overall housing, it will help to make it affordable, right? When you're starting out, you don't need that humongous house. When you have
Right.
your kids, you may have that. When they're gone, you don't need that space anymore. Some people might. That's okay. And that's, again, that's entitlement and that privilege mindset. And that doesn't even have to do with just one race, right? There are a lot of people who are privileged and feel entitled and don't realize that they know that.
Well,
So go ahead.
you communicated with me earlier about how many of your students had concerns about whether they'd ever be able to find a good job when they graduated, whether they'd be able to ever afford decent housing, whether they'd be able to pay back student loans. I mean, it seems like a great deal of disillusionment and
Yeah.
disenchantment has taken
Yeah.
hold of the Gen Z or millennial generation. Tell me about some of your thoughts how the younger generation is coping.
So I think part of it is they're looking for like words they use that they know is networking and building, brand and getting internship or apprenticeship. They're looking for those things. And to again, two of your earlier points about the misinformation and disinformation, like there are job opportunities out there as education institutions. Part of what we have to do, and they're doing that, and they're making that transition. If they're not, is to provide those transferable skills, like something about, right? That personal professional development, those transferable skills, which get them ready to go into the job. Schools will
Hmm. Hmm.
provide the technical skills that they need, and providing that kind of mentorship that kind of guides them and help them. We bring speakers into our class from time to time. They're different, have different opportunities and so on. And that exposes the students to other things that they need to do to be able to find the jobs and kind of open their eyes, help them to see there are other opportunities. Not because you're going for a law degree doesn't mean that, I'm going to use, because it's trending, Bitcoin or the distributed ledger, blockchain, or AI is not an opportunity for you to still be an attorney, right? It's a different space and a
Right,
different world.
right. Well, we both know, Corrine, that life is not smooth. There are a lot of bumps in the road and a lot of obstacles that we have to overcome. In the book, How to Create Your Future with Confidence, in one chapter, you write about never, never, never quitting, no matter how difficult things might seem,
Oh my
no matter
gosh.
how many barriers are placed in your way. Can you elaborate on that theme?
Yeah, I mean, the long story short is I encountered a poem when I was 8 for a recital, and it says, "Don't quit." And my life journey has shown me that even my corporate world with the organizations that I've worked with, people I've consulted or mentored, and we just look at life in general, like you don't give up, right? There's always an opportunity. There's the next day, the next minute, the next moment. Healed your wounds, or people say lick your wounds. If hopefully that's appropriate to say on air these
Hmm.
days. And just go back, pick yourself up. Like it's never too late. And most importantly for that, I think you have to surround yourself. Nothing new that I'm sharing here or rocket science, right? With people who are going to be there to help to cheer you on. I find that makes the biggest difference in the world, right? When you fall as a kid, whatever else it is, folks cheering you on or saying yay, even as an adult, you build up and you want to get to that finish line. It doesn't mean that you have to get there first, but you want to continue to be able to get to whatever that finish line is for
And
you.
it's not
So
wrong. It's not wrong to seek help from other people either.
no.
I mean, I was just reading a piece about Anderson Cooper from CNN.
Yeah.
He's doing a series on podcasting as well about grief, and he wanted to reveal the inner issues that he felt, confronting his father's death, his brother's suicide, his
Mm,
mother's death,
yeah.
and he didn't want to do it with a camera crew. He
Right.
set the camera up and he just put it on himself, and he just wanted to just pour it out. And there's nothing wrong, and I think a lot of people still have a stigma about seeking
Yeah.
help or talking to your parents or talking to some friends. I mean, don't be isolated. I think that that's a big issue today. People are so isolated. They're on their iPhones and on their iPads and on their computers, and they don't talk to anyone.
hmm You're spot on, Jim, with everything you're saying. Just totally spot on. And that's where also, in terms of the isolation, sometimes that's what feeds them. I'll tell you, for me, for I use Facebook a lot, and that's because I do a lot of things in the community. And every opportunity, as I before I drive off and stuff, I'm posting things. I also check in because I know people need people to share them on. People want to know that people know that someone's interacting with them, because it's their call for help, right? It's a social space. You don't look at all the other things that are going on. And it kind of, for me, it's like a detox, right? But I don't
Right.
stay on it. I can't imagine, but it's there. So when you're empty and there's no one who's going to make that space or wanting to do that, and sometimes you just share, like, what, Anderson did, like, you have to be vulnerable. You either have to do it in your own space and time, but it's okay, and you have to do it. It's an energy that you just have to release, and it has to come out.
And for these young kids, though, I mean, there's a lot of bullying and hostility that goes on. I mean,
Mm.
you can be targeted
Hmm.
by your schoolmates,
Yes.
and people can post things about you or take a video of you that you're not even aware of.
Hmm.
You know, there's some horrid things going on online, and somehow I don't know. Perhaps the educational institutions in our country need to get involved in this and start teaching kids how to utilize these technological tools, because they're getting taken advantage of, and they don't know what to think or how to deal with these issues and how to confront them if there is bullying going on. I mean, what do you do? How do you resolve those issues?
So I'm going to say, for the most part, I think a lot of these institutions are doing, and they're in place. And I think a lot of the students, for example, even my class, I teach a class, corporate social responsibility and sustainability at LIU Post, as you mentioned in an earlier part of the segment. And you have individuals, like some of our case studies that we do, and we look at real companies, real life situation that are happening. The students will come up and they will tell you, they're going to come to the aid of the person. So it's always trying to create, we've heard this time and time again, a safe space where individuals can come to. Sometimes a lot of this, though, is from the home space, right? So it's not just the space in terms of school. This is something from home, in that space, whatever that is, that family space that is still holding them back from being able to do that. And I think you just create as many opportunities that you can for anyone who is in going through those moments to be able to reach out to you, and you can point them in that direction. I think that is very important.
Just a final thought, and I want to
Hmm.
get back to where we began, which was talking about disinformation and misinformation. Uh, this is a big, big question, but how can America continue to be a global leader and maintain a powerful democracy when so many young people have been turned off by politics, by the constant gridlock they hear about in Congress and our state governments, and even at the local level? How do we ensure that we have a new generation of leaders and politicians so America remains strong in an increasingly hostile world?
Yeah, that's interesting, because I think with we remember the time when Bernie was running and how the college students were behind him in terms of what it is. And I think they know how to advocate, and their voice is being heard. I think we just continue to help them, and kind of show them that there are opportunities. But there's a lot of them who they don't care for politics, because exactly what you said, it's become so ugly. It's not something that they want. It's not something that's part of their world. They know how to kind of live together. They have embraced diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I think we just make sure that they know through courses like the ones that I teach and others, leadership courses and so on, the importance of their voice and the
Hmm.
importance of the things that matter to them or that will matter to them in the future. If you don't bring their attention to it, they're going to just keep thinking, you know what, there's no fixing it. So
Right.
we have to make sure that we keep them engaged.
And nothing is more important than getting out and voting,
Yeah.
because that's the bottom line. I mean,
Hmm.
some of the elections that we just went through in the midterms of 2022 were
Hmm.
decided by hundreds of votes. I mean,
Hmm.
if you can turn society around if you get out there and participate.
Hmm.
And Corrine, as usual, there's never enough time, but we're going to have you back in the future on the big shift. Uh, Thank you so much for being with us.
Jim, thanks for inviting me, and I hope I was able to add something to the conversation. All this really huge and very important part of what's going on and the dynamic aspect of this big shift that we're experiencing, not just in the US, but for our planet. So, thank you for having me on. I really appreciate
Oh,
it.
yeah, it was my pleasure. And that was Corrine Graham, the president of Graham International Consulting in New York. I'm Jim Paymar, and you have been listening to The Big Shift, available wherever you get your podcasts. And thanks for listening today, and stay tuned for the next episode of The Big Shift coming soon. Stay tuned.